All right, welcome everybody. Since everybody's been here a number of times, we're going to dispense with the introductory slides. But I'd like to welcome Mark Everett, our illustrious leader of the NCAC tonight, and Sarah Absher, our advisor from the director of the Community Development Department for Tillamook County, and Wyatt Angelo, my partner tonight in presenting Article VI, Executive Boards. Tom Sipe, our editor from our committee, and we have members Bill Bush and Barbara Triplett so far tonight. So it's obviously a very interesting subject for a lot of people. So thank you for those of you who are joining us tonight or watching a video. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the screen. Whoops. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So as you know, our subcommittee is divided into one or two people to come up with recommendations. And then they're reviewed by our committee, full committee, subcommittee, and then presented to you all for feedback tonight at these various feedback sessions. We have two more scheduled after this on Saturday. We're going to have Article 7 on subcommittees, and on next Wednesday night at 7, we're going to have Article 10, which is kind of everything else, just kind of a catch-all with lots of definitions. And Tom, I'm not sure what else you're including. You and Wyatt, I think, are working on Article 10.
Yeah, well, we might need to work on that.
Yeah, we do, Tom. Well, we had to get through some of this stuff before we could do anything. So
absolutely.
We didn't know what was going to get chucked out of the other thing.
Yeah,
that's right.
Catch-all.
That's right.
Okay.
So, but there'll be something by next Wednesday. And then we have a kind of a, if we need it, one scheduled for the 23rd, Saturday, the 23rd at 2, if we think we need another one. But I think we're moving along pretty well. So Article 6 is a new article that we proposed as a bylaws subcommittee to the executive board. It's recommended by Robert's Rules of Order that we're following for our bylaws structure to provide a forum for more detailed discussions than we can have in a general meeting. And also with Oregon Public Meeting Law, it makes it really nice to be able to meet publicly following all the rules in OPBML, but to have a little bit more business discussed. So. And so we have these sections of composition, duties, actions, and then we have a bunch of related sections to Article 6 that appear in Article 5. So you would have heard about these sections if you were in the Article 5 feedback session, but we'll go through them tonight fairly briefly unless people would like to know more. The one thing that's different is emergency meetings section 4C. After the meeting section, Jeff, our secretary, recommended considering adding emergency meetings to the executive board area. And so we have drafted that and are interested in your feedback on that. So Wyatt, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, I'm a little bit unprepared. It feels like law school. The whole idea here is to streamline the process for the whole group, for the group as a whole, as well as for the officers, to kind of plan for the next meeting as well as identify agenda items. And so the issues have not been all that controversial. The current and existing officers of the committee obviously would be compose the basis for the executive committee, but also the heads of the committees that are, or subcommittees, excuse me, now that we've clarified that, that would be contributing to the business of the committee itself. And so these have really not been all that difficult to identify so that we could get the people in the same room or the same Zoom call to plan for the next general meetings so that they flow efficiently and It seems to me that this is pretty non-controversial and easy one to kind of identify for the purposes of the current officers and ask for their comments, and then try to maybe fine tune it. But I think it's in a pretty good shape right now, based upon the work that's already been done. So I'm not sure there's much that needs to be said, Nancy.
Hey, thank you, Wyatt. And you bring up a good point. First of all, I'd like to welcome Doug Olson, who's the Vice Chair of the Tillamook County Board of Commissioners. Thank you so much for joining us, Commissioner Olson.
Thank you. I'll just stand by.
Okay, you're welcome. And we're so informal tonight. It's a small group, so people please feel free to, we'll have a couple of areas where we're going to have discussion, but we're not even doing a poll tonight. But we do want to say that our bylaws subcommittee recommended to the officers fairly early on about the value of an executive board. And we want to thank Mark and the other officers for agreeing to try it out. So they've had 2 executive board meetings so far, and a third is planned for, I think it's the 27th. I can't remember. It's Wednesday. It's a Wednesday night, the last Wednesday of the month. At 7 p.m. to have that, and it's proven to be quite valuable so far. So let's go ahead and go on. So basically, the duties are to transact business between the membership meetings and other business that might be referred by the membership. This includes planning agendas, discussing the work of officers and subcommittees. So one example is that in our last feedback session on, it's all blurring, was it meetings? Anyway, there was, yes, it was there was some there was membership. But on our feedback session on meetings, there was some discussion about if somebody wants to be able to have an agenda item, how would they be able to get that on the agenda? Because it's really not appropriate to come to a meeting and propose new business necessarily if it hasn't been agendized already. They can propose it, but the chair would normally take that under advisement, and they could take it back to the executive board meeting, or a member could send an agenda item to the info at email address and ask to have an agenda put on the agenda. So all that can be discussed, and then they can discuss the work of the officers and work of subcommittees in more detail than there's time for in a general meeting. Also, these bylaws revisions under officers are proposing to have the treasurer prepare a budget for approval by the membership, but have it in conjunction with the board. So this would be a way to do that without having to have individual conversations. And then they could authorize the payment of membership bills only within the limits of the budget. And then that action needs to be ratified at the next membership meeting and recorded. And then recommend to the membership creation of new subcommittees if they're deemed necessary. So, and then present a report at the meetings of the membership of what happened at the executive board. So it's all pretty straightforward. Do you want to do this one, Wyatt, or do you want to take a later one?
I'll take a later one, Nancy, if you can. I'm looking at something right now.
Okay, so basically the executive board shall take no actions that would conflict with the bylaws or action taken by the membership. The executive board shall make recommendations to the membership for approval in general meetings. So it's not that the executive board is necessarily making decisions, it's that getting recommendations ready to present to the membership, kind of in keeping with what the current officers have said that they would like to do, of having the membership, building trust and transparency and having the membership be able to make decisions. So that's it for the main article that will be in the bylaws for this. After we discuss this a little bit, we'll go into the part that's in the meetings section that affects executive boards. But at this point, does anybody have any questions or any discussion of anything you've heard? Okay, cool. Sounds like.
Nancy, just a second, if I can. Mark,
Mm-hmm.
did you have any thoughts about adding to the, I guess, scope of the executive committee meetings at this point that would facilitate the business of the committee?
I don't, I don't really know. You know, we've had two of them, and I think when I think about it, I think we just want to stay within the lines of, and the executive committee meetings of just talking about, you know, agendas for the next general meeting, and maybe recommendations that we're going to bring to the membership for their approval. But you know, I appreciate, I mean, I think as time goes on, some things might pop up where we might have a question about it, but so far it's run really smoothly, I think. For the
Okay.
Yeah, you know.
So
Yeah.
one thing it occurred to me, given our last conversations about meetings, was that one of the duties might be to authorize special and emergency meetings. I don't see
Right,
that
and
here.
Okay.
and we have that down further,
Yeah,
Tom.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I
I
thought
mean,
that was there. Okay. Fair
but
enough.
it is, no, I think you bring up good things. So after we go into that part of where we cover that under meetings under Article 5, why don't we relook and see whether you think it should go back into have it again in Article 6. But I'm thinking when we see the overall bylaws, it'll probably make a little more sense, hopefully. We have a chat item. Barbara has a question for Sarah Absher regarding emergency meetings. So Barbara, can you hold that until we get into the emergency meeting section? Would that be okay? Because we haven't covered it yet. Right now we're just doing these main things. And I can guess what your question is going to be. And I think it would be good.
That's fine. I wasn't sure whether it would come up later or
Yeah.
not. I can wait.
No, it will. We're going to, so we've just covered these sections 1 through 3, and now we're going to go into section 4 with all the ones that have been moved over to Article 5 or are covered in Article 5. Also, we used one of the second executive board meeting or executive committee meeting to talk about Article 6 fairly substantially with the officers, so that they had a chance to provide input, and they did. They provided some great input. So that was really a helpful example of why we have executive boards, along with some of the other articles of the bylaws. Okay, so related sections. Are you going to cover this, Wyatt?
Yeah, I'm not sure that there's much to cover here. Just this is basic notice provisions for the purposes of the executive board meetings, and how they're to be posted. And I don't know that there's a lot to be said, Nancy. If you want to throw something in, please feel free, but I don't see much to discuss here.
Yeah, thank you. It's basically that they would generally meet once a month, but in a minimum of 14 days prior to the membership meetings to be able to meet notice requirements. But they do have the option of not having an executive board meeting. All they have to do is so that unless otherwise ordered by the executive board. And so they can just notice if they're going to change it or cancel a meeting. There are all sorts of ways to make it iffy. And because I know it may be that some months they're not going to need one. Hopefully they will, at least a short one, but they don't have to. And then meeting notices are similar to other meeting notices in Article 5. So this was an area in Article 5, they just covered special executive board meetings. So like general executive board or special meetings for membership, there could be a single topic or a special topic that they want to be able to spend more time on, that can be called by the chairperson. Or they can also be called by the written request of 3 executive board members. I say I'm not consistent on capitalization, but Tom will fix that. And then they can be held within 14 days of receipt of an emailed request. And all members must be notified of special meetings at least 7 days prior to the meeting. Only business just like regular membership meetings, only business note mentioned in the notice of the special meeting can be transacted at that meeting.
Nancy, just one point of editing, I think here. I
Mhm.
note that we've specifically identified email requests in paragraph 2. Do we need to make that email requests on paragraph 1 with respect to the chairperson?
That is emailed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably that's a good point. Anyone object to our suggesting a change of this to be emailed? No one writes anymore, right?
Some of us write.
We write via email,
We're
right?
dinosaurs, Tom.
Okay, does that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah.
Whoops, I underlined it. So click the wrong box. Okay, any other comments? We're getting to yours, Barbara. Emergency. So this is the section that we've just talked individually with certain board members or with certain committee members. Well, Bill Bush said, what about text message instead of email?
I don't know
Yeah.
how easy it is to capture that, though, for the purposes of
Mhm.
record keeping.
Yeah, couldn't do that.
So do you want to cover emergency meetings, Wyatt?
Yeah, there was a general discussion about emergency meetings of the association that we had not too long ago, which raised the issue about what could possibly require an emergency meeting of the association. I guess the same question applies to the executive board. But the idea, and I think the rationale, was that not everything is foreseeable. And so creating this ability under the bylaws and creating some minimum notice requirements, obviously, to comply with Oregon Public Meetings Law seemed like it was just good policy, not necessarily that it's ever going to happen, but you don't want to run into a situation where you can't deal with something on a timely basis. And one of the things that struck us as we discussed the earlier discussion was a request for some kind of immediate commentary about something coming before some board, commission, or otherwise. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the county. It could be a federal government, could be state government that requires or requests some kind of action on behalf of the committee. And so it was just, we thought it was good policy to include this. It may not ever be used. And I think that's a realization that we all had when we put it in there.
Okay, so Barbara, let's get to your question. Thank you, Wyatt. You had a question for Sarah about this?
Yeah, my question is, Sarah, are you aware of any time when the county has gone to the CACs throughout Tillamook County and asked for a response within 24 hours?
Thank you, Barbara. That's a great question. And from what I can recollect, no. And that's going back to 2007 when I started working with all the CACs.
Thank you.
But if I may, to visit a little bit more about Wyatt's points as well, Nancy.
Oh, please, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think this is an excellent idea, and I think that this is needed, and I'll tell you why. Hopefully, Barbara, there is never an emergency that comes up to where the county is going to say, Sarah, we need an answer in 24 hours, because I can't imagine it would be about anything good. So it would probably be some sort of, concerning event. So I don't see that happening. But what I do see happening is many of our land use notices have a 2-week public comment period. And with the CAC only meeting bi-monthly, it is inevitable that I will have notices open for land use applications that will not align with your meeting dates. And because we are on a pretty strict timeline to process those applications, notice them, and make a decision, we can't wait for all of your meetings to occur. We can't put our notice schedule on your meeting schedule. So what I like about this is that provided 24-hour notice is given of a meeting, the CAC can have a meeting outside of its normal meeting schedule. I don't know if I would necessarily call it an emergency meeting. I don't know if there's a different word that could be used, because again, to Barbara's point, that's a pretty that has a pretty serious tone to it, and certainly not a positive one, right? Mm-hmm. So I would be happy to ask county council if you would like me to see if there's another way we could call these, what else we could call these meetings. But I think they're important, especially if you guys want to comment on some of those type 2 reviews that aren't going to go to hearing.
Thank you, Sarah. So, and I see your hand, Barbara. We'll get back to you here just in a moment. We've been thinking urgent and critical. And I'm wondering if there's some other words, or we could say urgent and critical, or time sensitive, I guess is kind of what I'm hearing. Time sensitive, maybe. I
like time sensitive, Nancy.
Yeah.
But I have seen, unfortunately, through my tenure, CACs miss comment opportunities because, you know, I have specific rules I have to follow for public comment periods, and sometimes they're just not long enough with your meeting schedules.
So what we could do is say, for example, for the executive board could meet quickly to talk about this and decide, okay, we need to send out a notice to the membership about this opportunity for public comment, and even then have an emergency meeting or whatever we call it, of the membership if we need to. Barbara?
Yes, so thank you for that, Sarah.
Sure.
I've really scratched my head over the last few days to try to think of an example, and I think the one that you've brought to our attention is it fits the need if we want to keep emergency meetings in. What I was hearing was, from my point of view, CAC, the A stands for advisory. Advisory to me means that there is should be an opportunity for deliberation and then returning an answer back to the county. And the examples that were discussed the last time stepped on the toes of other organizations in the county that are handling emergency situations. And so I think it's critical that the officers and the membership of the NCAC understand what the NCAC's objectives are, and what the objectives of things like the South Tillamook County Emergency Volunteer Corps are responsible for. One of the examples was tossed out of, well, if we had another flood in the RV park, maybe the NCAC would weigh in. Absolutely not. There's no training. There's no understanding of what the needs are. There's no understanding of who else needs to be contacted. That's not an appropriate thing for people on this in the NCAC to get involved with. And so I think it's critical that that it be aligned with the objectives of the NCAC. Needs to understand what its goals and its objectives and the needs are, and tip their hat to the other organizations in South Tillamook County that are prepared for dealing with real emergencies. So I'll get off my soapbox now, and I appreciate the insight that you have, Sarah, on time-sensitive matters.
I appreciate that too. And Barbara, I would like to just say, I don't think any of the intent of the committee or the NCAC in general was to step on the toes of other organizations that are there to, handle emergency situations. I think we were just caught a little flat-footed on what the examples would be. So this was very helpful, Sarah, also, and Wyatt, I think I cut you off.
That's quite all right. I wondered if Sarah could let us all know whether in fact, if we had a situation like that, is it possible for an organization like the NCAC to request an extension for comment of the county?
That's a great question, Wyatt, and the short answer is no. Those timelines are all prescribed, and when public comments period public comment periods close, they close.
Okay.
Mhm. Which is why I think this is a wonderful idea, is specifically
Yeah.
for that reason.
Okay.
Thank you. So maybe instead of emergency, we say urgent and time sensitive meetings, or
Just
I don't
time
know.
sensitive, I think would be good.
Yeah, so Bill Bush wrote, as a participant in a couple of mass casualty disasters, emergency doesn't seem appropriate as a description of an urgent meeting. So
Yeah, urgent. I like urgent.
so we change this maybe to urgent.
Sure.
Is that going to capture it all, do you think? Everybody think that's okay to recommend to the bylaws committee, subcommittee?
Yeah.
What do you think,
There'll
Mark?
be-
Are you okay with this?
Yeah, I did kind of like the time sensitive part of it, so that if you're a member of the NCAC and you get an email about a notice that's gonna, we're gonna have a meeting in 24 hours. Urgent is okay, right? But
Mm-hmm.
urgent / time sensitive is like, okay, maybe it's, it's urgent, but maybe it's just time sensitive as well, so I don't know.
I don't know if it's, sorry, it's time sensitive. It's already urgent.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's just the editor and me having,
Yeah,
not being
yeah.
able to stifle myself.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's just a little thing. I mean, yeah,
Mhm.
it's not a big deal, but I think
Okay.
maybe to the reader, it might be okay, or time sensitive.
So Barbara is saying she likes time sensitive. So we'll play around with that. And but thank you. I think that helps a lot. And having that notice or that example, Sarah, was very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. You could
and then we
also,
would change that in the general meeting, Article 5 too, to make it consistent for the general meetings.
the title also, like I've seen, meetings outside of regularly scheduled CAC meetings. I've seen that language used too, because, it may not be urgent or time sensitive. You may have enough, time to notice everyone with a week or two, but perhaps it's still ultimately outside of your normal meeting schedule.
Right. So that's what we call special meetings. And we have that for both general meetings and executive board meetings and
Mhm.
subcommittee meetings where we don't have time sensitivity, but we may want to meet on a specific issue or issues outside of a normal meeting. So an
Right.
example of that would be if we have a special membership meeting to approve the bylaws in May, for example, that would be a special meeting, but it's not time sensitive. So that's why the current bylaws actually say special meetings with like a 2-day notice allowed. There's not, and so we split them out into special and emergency, but time sensitive. So that we would have to give enough notice for a regular special meeting. I mean, that doesn't make sense, but
That makes sense.
But
Thank
you
you.
know, so I don't know. Maybe we could just leave it the way it is currently, where we don't split them out. But it just seemed like there were two cases there where we wanted to make sure enough notice was given for a special meeting that's not urgent.
Mhm. Right.
That makes a
so-
lot of sense.
Okay. And then quorum is, we talked about quorum quite a bit when we presented Article 5, but it's sets the minimum number of members present that need to be present to discuss business and to vote. And we're just saying a majority of the executive board members must be present to constitute a quorum for all executive board meetings. And that's just out of Robert's rules. So that's our recommendation for quorum for anything that's not a general membership meeting, subcommittee meetings, etc.
Can I ask a question about that? Quorum, so the executive board, I mean, let's just take right now, for example. So we have, is it correct that it would be the 4 officers and then the chairs of the 2 committees?
And then once you have a parliamentarian that's
Okay.
a formal member after the bylaws are approved. I know you set Michael, each meeting, but once the bylaws are approved, then that position would be set. Then there would be 7.
Okay, got it.
So,
Okay.
so I've got actually a question on this that I didn't think of till that just got prompted. Is it all committees or just standing committees? In other
It's
words,
all committees.
okay, that does say that. I didn't remember.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah,
planning committee would also have a seat
correct. That's right.
until it wasn't there, and then it wouldn't. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, no, but anything that is going to be making recommendations to the full committee, the full NCAC would have this quorum.
Okay,
good.
Okay.
And it's typical. I mean, that's just Robert's rules, and it just makes sense. You want to have a majority present
Right.
to make any decisions. So even if it were only 6 like currently for the executive board, it would be 4 would need to be present. For our subcommittee, 4 need to be present. So far, we've been able to manage that. Doesn't matter for feedback sessions that are just informational gathering input. Any other questions about that? So conflict of interest is another one. So we're just saying basically the same conflict of interest section applies, but any executive board member who votes or proposes a position on a proposition is obligated to disclose the existence of any direct, indirect, special, or financial interest in that proposition before voting or proposing on that proposition. And any discussions of conflict need to be part of the record. So after our Article 5 meetings, I did go in and went into the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, I believe is what it's called, website, in which the Oregon something of cities, 2 of those were recommended anyway, and read up on conflict of interest. And what I read was it's pretty much the same as what we've got as a definition of conflict of interest, but it's very, very detailed on how it's implemented. And so I think we need to put a bunch of stuff, Tom, in the P&Ps or for definitions on what the conflict is, probably Article 10, have some definitions, or in the policies and procedures. It's pretty complicated they give examples in there on what constitutes conflict and what doesn't in terms of what kind of a group you are. If you're an advisory committee, it even gives that kind of information. And so I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but it was very interesting to read. And
if you could send me some pointers on that, I'll try to summarize that.
Okay, I'll do that.
But
Tom, I've got some thoughts about it too. I'll email
excellent.
to you.
You got it.
Okay. But yeah, I'll send you a couple of links. The Oregon, I'm sorry, I don't remember what it's called. The League of Cities or
League of Cities.
Thank you. Had a tutorial actually that was quite good that went through various examples and stuff. So we can get educated on that. And then voting. Do you want to handle voting, Wyatt?
Sure. Let me take a look at it for a second.
It's been a while since Wyatt and
I know, it's just like, yeah, I think the biggest issue here was that we wrestled with was, well, there's 2. One of which was dictated by the public meetings law and also by county council about linking names to votes in meetings. And that was a problem for many of us. And the paragraph 3 you'll see is really kind of in there because the county council believed that that was what we had to do. There was a great hue and cry, and reasonably so, about wanting to hold voting to be anonymous so that people didn't worry about offending their neighbor by not voting for them if they thought they were unqualified or something along those lines. And I think we're still waiting for some opinions about that from county council, if I recall correctly. The other one that was, I think, not necessarily a problem was the proxy issue. And the problems of authenticating and tabulating proxies, as well as the fact that we now have the ability to hold meetings in such a fashion that absences are not necessarily matters of access, but more by way of other person's conflicts. And so by eliminating the need for physical presence to vote, it was, I think, a lot easier for us to eliminate the idea of proxy voting, in addition to the administrative nightmares, which are legion about proxy voting, because proxies can take any number of forms. They can just be a general appointment of the person to vote. They can be an appointment of the person to vote on a specific issue only. And it could be an appointment of a person to vote for another person, not only on a specific issue, but to make a specific vote on that issue. And we don't want to get involved in that kind of stuff. So we kept it simple and just eliminated it.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Wyatt.
Thank you, Wyatt. So I did visit with county council yesterday afternoon and did also advise Commissioner Olson the way you have it written, that all votes shall be recorded publicly. That is correct. So thank you for that.
So even for elections, he said even for elections, we have to do that.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for checking once again. Was there anything, well, we could talk offline about whether there are any other decisions that came out from your meeting. So that's basically it. We're not doing a poll, as I said, but is there any discussion overall on our recommendations at this point?
I just have just a comment, and I know it's one that you've heard before, and it's one, honestly, that I've thought about since the election in June, but you know, it's just a question of how we can, if there's a way that we can get more people to vote on the issues that are, that are coming, that require a vote, right? Whether it's officers or the community plan. And, we're a member of an HOA over in Sisters, and they do kind of this. I heard Wyatt talk about proxy voting, and they do proxy voting, but there's just an HOA, so maybe it's a whole different deal. But but it's a way for everybody to vote. It comes in the mail, and you fill it out and you send it back, or you select somebody that they're gonna do your vote for you. But I don't know the answer to this question, but we typically have our meetings on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock. Maybe with the new bylaws, we can change that time, to a different time, but just to try and get more people, to vote. That's all. That's just what I wanted to throw out there, but.
It's a tough situation. Robert's Rules comes down really hard on this issue if it's not like a stock kind of a program or whatever. And the reason that they do is that you can introduce new material in a meeting. They're through debate and discussion. People can introduce things that if you have a proxy or people that aren't attending, they're not going to hear that part. For an election, you might have somebody nominated from the floor who speaks.
Sure.
And if you have proxies, then that person might not get elected when they might have, if it's only people that are present can vote. So that's kind of the purpose of it. But I think you bring up a larger issue of how can we get more people to attend meetings? Certainly in the bylaws, you can change the time of the meeting. You could even change the date of the meeting with enough notice.
Yeah.
But we're actually taking the time of the meeting and putting it in the policies and procedures. So the date of the meeting is in the bylaws, but it's changeable.
Okay.
So, because there can be, with enough notice,
Yeah. Okay.
you can change it. So there's some flexibility there, but in terms of being able to get, I like the idea that came up in our meetings, Article 5, of having, and this is outside our committee, by the way, but of having a subcommittee for marketing or a membership
Oh, right.
set up where they could go out and figure out ways to get to residents or property owners, of the NCAC and let them know what's happening and invite them to participate in a way that you'd almost need people dedicated to do that to be able to do, like Jeff and you guys have been doing a fabulous job just getting word out about meetings and through emails. And I guess there's quite an email list, but to be able to get to people who don't really know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff's done a great job with that. And
Mhm.
and I know, I mean, I understand all of those things. I know that. I just you always want more people, coming and voting or sharing the discussion than you get. That's all, so.
Yeah.
But
I've been pretty impressed at the number of people
Yeah,
that come
yeah.
to
Well,
most
on
of
some
our
issues,
meetings.
on some
issues,
yeah, on some issues, they will really do it. So I
But I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah,
Yeah. Anyone else have any comments or would like to?
We should welcome Doug.
I think I did.
Did you? Okay, I must have
Yeah.
been distracted.
But I can welcome you again, Commissioner Olson. Thank you for joining us once again. Do you have anything you'd like to share? Oh, and I see Barbara raised her hand.
No, thank you. I don't. I think Sarah is a very competent and expert spokesperson for Tillamook County. She knows this far better than I. The only thing I would suggest on getting the turnout, some years ago, I lived in Chicago on a corporate assignment. And if you follow the Chicago model, you simply pay people to vote. Seems to work for them, but I wouldn't recommend it here. But no,
Rather they have to be dead.
absolutely on the right track and keep doing what you're doing. This is government at its very best.
Thank you so
I
much,
grew up
Commissioner
in Cook
Olson.
County. I grew up in Cook County, and I can attest to your.
So did I, Tom.
Yeah.
Wow, small world. Barbara.
I want to take this opportunity to say thank you for a very short meeting tonight. And when Tom Prohodich comes back from his trip to Texas, I want you to all of you to tell him that the reason we were out of here in 45 minutes is that he was participating.
Okay, thank you. I think our meeting is getting pretty punchy now. I'm enjoying it. So thank you, Barbara. Is there anything else you'd like to say about Article 6? And if not, I think thank you all for coming on a Wednesday night and sharing your thoughts and listening to this. And hopefully we will see you all on Saturday for Article 7 subcommittees. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording now. Meeting adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Nice
night.
to
Good
see
night.
you. Take care.